He served in a number of leadership roles at Partners for Sacred Places, which is where he was before he became a Redeemer. Most recently, a director of special initiatives, developing new programs, overseeing grant making and assisting with congregations nationally, and working directly with congregations on fundraising, community engagement, and the alignment between property and mission. I think this may have been the key to how we are together with Joshua here at Redeemer now, the alignment between property and mission. Recent highlights of his work included managing a team collaborating with 2 Episcopal dioceses to help over 80 parishes find new ways to use their properties for mission, while investing in their buildings and grounds in sustainable and strategic ways. Joshua obtained his BA in art history from Oberlin, where he curated an exhibition. This is interesting for Philadelphians. An exhibition highlighting Philadelphia architect Robert Venturi's landmark work on that campus, Oberlin College. Everyone, repeat Joshua.
It's really wonderful to be in Redeemer, and I just every day when I arrive here on campus, I'm thrilled to be in such a beautiful place, that's such a thriving parish with just an incredible congregation. It's great to be here and great to work here every day. I will say that actually working with Robert Venturi on that exhibition was my first time in Manayunk. And now I live like a mile away, so from his office. It's a sort of weird turn of destiny. So I always like to say, or I've said this several times in our staff meetings and conversations in the office, that the most important building on this campus, although we built a very beautiful, lovely parish hall with a lot of enormous generosity, and it does great things for us, but the most important building on these 9 acres is this building. Because this building sets the purpose for everything that happens on these 9 acres. This building is where the most important thing every week happens, which just happened this morning. This building is the one that brings everyone together for the very central purpose of what the Redeemer is, which is a parish that is here to worship and serve God. So, what's very interesting about something like a fire is that it can remind you of the beauty that has become so everyday that it ends up becoming unnoticed. It also helps us renew the beauty of things that may be worn, or the years have taken a little bit of a toll, and we haven't invested the same level of resources in them. So, an interesting thing like a fire, or a fire has an interesting impact in just kind of bringing our attention again back to the beauty we have and the beauty we want to renew and restore in this important building. If you're not familiar with some of the basic facts of this building, I won't recap the other adult forum I did, but just to let you know that the majority of this building, there have been several additions and elaborations over time. But the original core of this building originally ended at the 2 large pillars, which are the third to last. So there's the one engaged in the wall, and there's one that's large on the other side. That's where the original church ended. When it was constructed in 1812 first, and there was an addition added, and that wall was pushed out, the narthex was added. Some other additional spaces behind the chancel were also added later. This will be important as I kind of lay out what happened in the different steps we took. So, I'm sure that Peter has said quite a bit about the night of the fire and discovering what happened. Thank God the fire was caught soon enough that it didn't spread from the side aisle into the nave aisle. That would have been a disaster. We probably would have seen major structural damage, and if not losing the church, at least having it, we probably wouldn't be sitting here today after service. The destruction of the fire directly in terms of material that was lost is really relegated to the last bay of the side aisle. And I'll speak a little bit, and then I'll actually ask us to go over there in a few minutes and take a look and talk about the reconstruction and repairs. The other thing a fire does, besides actually destroying the material directly, is leaving a layer of soot and dirt and sediment. And it's pretty remarkable how even a fire that only burned maybe 30 to 40 minutes total from its very first spark, how much smoke, how much soot it could really leave over everything. So, and of course, we know now, with modern methods and science, how toxic that smoke can really be in the long term. So it presents a safety issue, not just one of cleanliness and hygiene. So, the day after the fire, we faced a church that had water damage all along the pews here, damaging the floor on this section of the nave. The firemen had cut out a hole in the roof, and we had charred roofing, a pile of broken slates outside, and then smoke and soot that had covered everything else throughout the church. So the first part of our response to the fire is what we call mitigation, which really means the cleaning and getting circumstances back to some kind of base level before we start talking about repairs and reconstruction. For the mitigation, we primarily worked with a firm known as ServPro, which is a national organization that does disaster recovery and post-fire mitigation. They came on site very early. We were very glad that we made a connection with one of our former fire chiefs in Lower Merion, who now works with ServPro and was able to connect us. And there are a few options in this field, but not many. Because obviously you can imagine the amount of labor, technical equipment, materials, and ability to move rapidly means that there's really only a few sort of organizations that can do this kind of work in that industry. So we worked with ServPro, and we took a look at this. Now, this isn't an office building downtown or just a small residence somewhere that was built 20 years ago. This is a fairly sized historic church. And with my background as a historic preservationist, I was very keen to make sure that however we cleaned this space, whatever chemicals and whatever methods we used, that they were appropriate for the building and for the various materials. You see, when you look around us, one of the things that makes this such a beautiful place is the mixture of granite and marble and brick of very different types that's been fired differently, colored differently, stained glass with the lead and the colored glass, et cetera, et cetera. The historic tiles here too. So you just have all these different materials. They can't all be cleaned the same way. I wouldn't take a Brillo pad to my all-clad, although I've been told that I could live if I did do that, but I probably wouldn't. So you have to treat each material in a way that's appropriate to it. So we had to negotiate heavily with ServPro and to make sure that they could modify what they usually do in this regard. So we brought in Heritage Conservation Consulting. This is another organization based in Philadelphia that's terrific. It mostly includes professionals who came from John Carr's Materials Conservation Organization. And after that organization sort of folded, they created a new firm. And this firm specializes in historic preservation and materials conservation, which is the science of restoring, repairing, renovating historic materials, like we have in this building. So they came in as consultants to help us. And of course, we worked with John Milner to also provide guidance, because they are our historic preservation architects. They designed the bathroom wing. They've done many of the improvements here over time. They know all of our buildings very, very well. So that was kind of our basic team, our lead team in responding to the fire and handling the mitigation. So what did we do? Well, we cleaned the church, and I hope that you've been able to see some difference, I think especially in the ceiling. This was an area of real concern, so maybe I'll start with the ceiling. We have this painted pattern, a combination of stain and paint. We did some testing, we had some paint experts here, and what we came to the conclusion was we couldn't use a liquid cleaner, because if we used anything liquid, we'd end up removing paint and stain. We also assessed the level of soot damage, and aside from the area closest to the fire, we felt that we could probably tackle it sufficiently to meet our standard of clean without having to use a liquid cleaner. So what it meant was we used these things, and I think Peter may have showed some folks what these look like. They're called soot sponges. They're a special, I should have it with me as an object lesson, but they're a special type of sponge that's used. You literally just dry, clean the surface, and it picks up, it's kind of a rubberizer. It picks up the soot and dirt and grime and dust. And so you go through boxes and boxes and boxes of these things, but you use them dry, so you're able to kind of clean without adding any kind of chemical or water-soluble material. So, how do we clean the ceiling? And I can tell you, those hot days of summer, there was no air conditioning on. The air conditioning system had water in it, and parts of that of the HVAC needed to be replaced. The ductwork underneath the floor on this side. So no air conditioning here at all. We had men and women on lifts. So we had 3 lifts installed in here after the pews were removed. So all the pews were sort of generally cleaned, unscrewed, removed, and taken out to offsite storage in New Jersey. The lifts came in down the aisle, and this is something that I insisted on. The back of the church, when it was extended, the floor is basically concrete. All this, the original part from the 1880s, is regular wood joists. Just wood joists. We decided where the pillars are. It's just wood joists. So we asked them to do shoring, to work with engineers to do shoring in the floor to support the weight of the lifts. It's kind of a double precaution. It's one of those things in preservation. You kind of always make a backup to the backup. And that was sort of our backup, just to make sure that we wouldn't have any damage to the floor or, too much weight in here. We had steel shoring installed underneath. So they came into the undercroft and installed steel columns and steel beams to support the floor and run side along so that we could have the lifts in. So we had 3 lifts with men and women on the lifts up in the ceiling. So on a day that might have been like 90 degrees down here or 85 degrees here, it was like 120 up there. They measured 115, 120 up there. In fact, they had to work in sort of short bursts because it was so hot. You can't have someone up there for 45 minutes and then just give them half an hour, maybe come down, go back up. So they sponged all the surfaces. Every surface was sponged with the soot sponges. We had the next part of the cleaning was what to do about the walls and the brick, where we probably could use a chemical, but again, we wanted to use the gentlest method. See, that's the thing. It's like you may have seen stuff around art conservation, right? And in art conservation, we always do the gentlest method. We start from gentle and then work our way up to see how much the artwork can take, right? It's the same thing when we're dealing with historic buildings, some of the same principles. Start gentle and then go from there. And use the gentlest method you need to get the results you want. So, in this case, with our advice from heritage conservation folks, we used a chemical. It's very interesting. There's various manufacturers of this. There's a lot of European manufacturers. It's very common there because there's a lot of historic buildings that need to be cleaned over in Europe. It's a kind of cleaner that lifts dirt, and it's applied as a liquid, but it has latex in it. So it actually dries, sort of like a face mask. Think of it like a face mask, but for masonry and buildings. So it's painted on with a brush, gently, to get to a pretty good thickness. It dries for about 12 to 16 hours, depending on the humidity. That was one of the challenges this summer. And then it's peeled off. And that's actually how we cleaned all of the columns here and the capitals. So I noticed this, that I thought the capitals, which are marble, And marble is actually a very soft stone. You ever seen a really old cemetery like at St. Peter's or Christ Church? The marble stones are basically all just, dissolved. They look like sugar cubes, that sat too long in coffee. I mean, this is what happens with marble. So using this method helped us get the soot and grime off the marble portions of the stone without harming it. So that was pretty cool. Apply it and then peel it off, which was really neat. For the brick work, we used another very gentle, highly diluted cleaner. We had to go through the spec sheets and analyze all the chemical composition and send it to John Milner, send it to Heritage Conservation, discuss the acidic or basic qualities of all the cleaners, and determine which one we felt safest with. We did test panels in the back wall, where you actually mark out with masking tape different sections. You apply the cleaner with this dilution, you apply it with this dilution, you apply the second cleaner. So we did all this testing to determine which one we wanted to go with. And it's, again, this was a basically organic cleaner that didn't have as many of the artificially synthesized compounds or acidic properties that CertPro had initially suggested. So that's how we cleaned most of the church here. I want to say also, by the way, that the plaster arch around the baptistry, to me, is another high point in terms of, it went essentially, in my mind, from gray to white with the soot sponging. So I don't think anybody should have a fire, but I want to tell other parish administrators, every 15 years, you should probably clean. Just do a real thorough cleaning like this. So then the next thing was stained glass. And ServPro, our insurance company, or actually our architects and our insurance company, supported the decision to not let ServPro actually handle the stained glass. And we worked with, and that's just because stained glass is a more specialized material. And they have a lot of great workers who can work really well with direction, but they're not specialized artists, craftspeople. So we worked with Castano Studios, who had worked on the rose window years ago. They came back, and they're a terrific small outfit. Their principal did his time at Bayer Studios, so he worked in a really large studio. It was fabulous. So they cleaned every window on the lower level by hand. They cleaned all of them, and I think they turned out pretty well. We learned a lot of things about some of our windows. We learned that one of the windows in the back was put in reverse, potentially, and also has some strange additional panels. So if you look at the child's face in the center arch of the window all the way at the end of this side aisle, the child's face is darker. It's because there's an additional glass panel that was at some point added, which we don't know why that is. It's a little bit of a mystery. We also actually, unfortunately, learned there's some damage and some conservation issues with the Tiffany stained glass windows, which are right here to the left of the entrance to the bathrooms. These are great windows. They're actually illustrated in Alistair Duncan's landmark book on Tiffany stained glass windows. These ones are illustrated, although I think they're misattributed. They don't actually say Church of the Redeemer, but they are here. And they're listed. It's a beautiful windows, but there are some conservation issues. There have clearly been a couple of repairs with glass that isn't really correct, either in color or composition. And there's some other glass that needs attention there too. So, we learned a few things about some of our spaces too. So that was most of the cleaning. We had the antiphonal division removed from the back of the church. So you see the boxes are here, which would supply all the mechanical power and air, etc., to the pipes. But the pipework has all been removed. The pipework on this side obviously was affected by the water. So if you hadn't heard about this, part of the way that they fought the fire was from below, by bringing in hose and actually shooting up into the roof, which is why we have so much water. We had so much water in this back of the sidewalk. it means that we had water on the pipes for the organ too. So.
Will those be back eventually? Or
Yeah. So they are being cleaned. The way you clean organ pipes is you take them all out. You put them in these lip because they're very gentle actually. You know, organ pipes are special alloys, and it's not like steel. You just bang a hammer on it. It's heavy. Breathe on it, it will crumble. It's more like tinfoil. So they get laid out in these little boxes. They get taken in their special boxes off-site. They get cleaned very gently back in the studio. Then they come back. They're almost always cleaned off-site. They're being cleaned. The other thing is we're waiting on the motors. It's a very long story, but there was a German company that made them. That company's out of business. There's a Korean company that makes them, but they're not as good as the Hungarian company. It's a long, circuitous supply chain story. So we have probably about 8 or 9 more weeks before the motors come in, and then we'll discuss getting the actual pipes back in for that division. And they did some cleaning here. The interesting way that they clean this area of the organ is they sort of seal it and use air pressure, a differential in air pressure to basically kind of gently vacuum it out, which is what they do. And I should also mention that the whole time from the fire afterwards, we had air cleaning systems running basically 24/7. There was a generator on the site that was basically just circulating air and filtering it in order to, again, remove soot and particulates out of the air and out of the space so that you could really bring down that smoke smell and remove it from just floating around. So that's another element of it.
Yeah. You mentioned some of these specialists, these experts that you brought in. Were you, from your prior life, already able to sort of say, it's got to be one of these 3 we work with? Because while you weren't generally working in fire circumstances, you were certainly working in spaces that had been neglected. Right?
Yes, that's a great question. So it was actually really helpful that maybe to serve apprenticeship, but as a historic preservationist, I've been working in historic churches all over the country. I was able to, so Marco Federico was one of the principals at Heritage Conservation I've worked with for like 10 years, and I knew that we needed the right conservation specialists here. I knew, a lot of my, especially when I was a partner, Sue was interested in stained glass, so again, I knew with stained glass, I knew there were some very particular things that we had to focus on, and I wanted stained glass people to work with, and I knew a lot of the studios here. So yeah, it came, I guess, in handy in a sense, because I did know a lot of the professionals and specialists. Yeah.
Can you either confirm or debunk a myth I heard that we had to sort of balance the dehumidification of the basement and not drying out certain areas too much? Or was there like...
That's really interesting. Yeah, that's a really interesting one. So some water did seep into the basement, and we had dehumidifiers there and up here. We had to just manage and measure the humidity. So if you've ever seen these, I forget the name of the tool, but that measures the humidity in the actual stuff. Literally, you just stab it, and the sensors are in the sort of pins. You just stick it right into the floor, and you measure the floor throughout in order to get humidity readings. And then you obviously measure for comparison an area that wasn't water damaged. And then you can set a target for the humidity you want to get back to. We did have to balance it. The helpful thing was it was like kind of high summer. So the general like environmental humidity was really high. If it was in winter, it might have been a challenge, like go real slow because you'll overshoot your goal. Whereas in summer, it was harder to do that. But we did. We take humidity measurements in the floor and set our target and try to get to that. Because if the floor had dried too fast or dried too much, it would have actually damaged it further. And in this case, it was damaged, but it just needed to be sanded and then refinished. All the planks were still good. But if we had dried it too much, it would have just damaged the whole thing. There would have been ripples, and it would have been a real nightmare, actually, to do that. I think that's most of the cleaning, and maybe we should just have some good questions and conversation. I would love to say a little bit. I'm going to say a little bit about the stained glass, which was a challenge. And thanks to our insurance company for being very okay with this. But obviously, you can imagine the project management, I don't know, what word do I want to use? Challenge of organizing the timing around all of these folks in order to meet our deadline of getting back in September 8th, and making sure, well, these guys need to be there first because these guys will be in their way, and this will be in their way, and they need to get the lifts out, but they can't get the lifts out. So one of the things that we had to work with was cleaning the rose window, and that beautiful window of Christ teaching the temple, which I just love. That, and actually the east window, the altar window, and those windows, they had to be cleaned with scaffolds. So the stained glass people had to erect scaffolds because it didn't work out with the timing to use the lifts that the other folks had. So we had to actually erect scaffolding up there, and that was really pretty exciting. I hope you saw some of the photographs of that. Just the amazing details in that window. They're really terrific. I want to show you a little bit about the reconstruction that we're going to do and the repairs, because we did all the cleaning, it's great, but there's still plenty of work left to do. Do we mind kind of standing up and taking a little walk? That was so you might also come along the side as well, because I know it's a little bit of tighter space. I just want to point out the repair. Well, it's actually hard for me to point it out now because they are so good that I have trouble finding where the repair was. But the night of the fire, as the firemen were cutting out material and it was falling through, clearly a piece swung in and hit the window. And we had the face of one of the apostles here kind of just pushed in. Just pushed it right in. And then you had a crack in the shoulder of this apostle. You can't see his face, but he's wearing this sort of rosy pink garment here. So this window was cleaned. This portion was removed, if you remember. And then actually they repaired the crack and repaired the face. But this is how good Castano Studios is. I can't even tell where it was. I mean, it's just impossible to find out where the crack was. They are really, truly good. And one of the great things about them is some of these artisans do this. They collect, essentially, dead stock from the past. So they have tons of material that's contemporary to the manufacturing period of this, so that they can replace with like. Because that's one of those other key elements of art conservation, building conservation, is replace like with like, as close as you can. And so they have the dead stock to do that, so they just did a fabulous job. So here's ground zero. And you can see you've still got a very nice hole and that ugly blue tarp on the outside. I can't wait till that'll be gone. So what we're doing here is going to be kind of interesting. We need a couple of firms working with us. So Heritage Conservation is going to come back because they can really do all the very fine, detailed carpentry that we need on the surfaces that you'll see. So the ceiling here, you'll see in these elements, there's the molded, there's the decorative molding around each square, the ton and groove of the ceiling, and then the painting, the decorative patterns on the painting. Heritage Conservation is going to handle all of that. We had engineers assess, however, these large trusses, so this one here and this one on this side, to assess their structural stability and how badly they were charred. And again, this is another fun thing. You just stick a knife in it and sort of measure how far the char went based on your knife being stuck in it. And so we had engineers from Landis & Landis look at that, and our architects. And so what they actually decided was these three rafters that are now exposed because the ceiling is gone, so this one, these common rafters, those are bad. And the original spec is to remove them and replace. And then this is called a purlin. So the purlin is that member that goes from this big rafter that's visible all the way to the side. You see the other side of the purlin is here. So it's the perpendicular member. The and that to replace the purlin. What we're going to do now is we have bids from roofers who are going to replace the slate and the roof decking and the underlayment. They'll also replace the 3 rafters that are here. What we've shifted a little bit and decided to actually sister in the new rafters. So what that means is to take a new one and just literally, like sisters, put them right next to each other, and that's the term we use, and just put the new right next to the old. So this is another thing that happens sometimes in preservation is you don't have to remove the old if you add a new one and sister it in. So it's still doing the structural work of bearing the load, but without having to replace and put it in place of the old ones. So we're going to put 3 new rafters here, sister them into the existing ones. We will probably replace the whole purlin though, so the purlin will be replaced, and Heritage Conservation will probably do that. And then they'll do all the ton and groove for the ceiling, and then the decorative moldings and paint. What was interesting, this is one of those things that we learned, is we didn't really have drawings of these details. You know, we have plenty of drawings of the parish house and the additions that have happened, but we don't have drawings of this interior stuff, how it was built, because it was built a long time ago and we've never had a disaster or a problem. So we actually had to have drawings made of all the construction and interior, how this is all put together and what the profiles are of the molding. We saved, Kyle Lissack was the first one to grab some of the semi-charred decorative molding, and I said, oh yeah, right, good idea, let's do that. And so we actually stored it and then allowed the architects about 2 months later, when they started working on the drawings, to actually use those to work on the profiles, so that we have exact profiles that will match everything else, because we want it to match. The last interesting kind of thing about the repairs that we're going to do is that sort of charred truss that you see there, or rafter, that's visible normally because it's under the ceiling panels. We've talked a lot about this, how we want to handle it. The engineers say it doesn't have to be removed. So what we're going to do, based on the architect's recommendations and drawings, is very interesting. Is sort of shave off the char. That's no other way to put it. Basically, shave off the char, apply a kind of resin. So it's an artificial material. It's a kind of resin to even out the surface and fill in. Because obviously you can imagine the char isn't consistent. So when we shave it off, you'll have an uneven surface, and it won't be, the same all the way through. So there's a resin kind of consolidant is what they also call it, that's applied on the surface. And then actually a veneer. So there'll be a wood veneer will be applied. So then it'll look and match, and it'll be painted and stained to match everything else. So, we went back and forth on what the best way to do that is, and that's what we'll end up doing. So we'll shave off that char, fill it in, and then add the veneer on top, and then paint and stain to match. So, and that's kind of the rest of our repairs there. We'll do a little bit more cleaning. We're going to be a little bit more aggressive with cleaning. It's hard to see here, especially in this raking light, but it's a little bit more black just under the peak here, close to where it meets the top. So we're going to be a little bit more aggressive with cleaning up there to just get the rest of that black soot out that's just kind of remaining up there. And that'll be that. The one thing, and I've told everybody, I said, I really want to make my Christmas present this project. And all the contractors say, oh, that's nice. That's very nice. That's so sweet that you want to do that. So we'll see. We have kind of an interesting scale job. It's not a tiny job, but it's not, we're not building a big addition or anything. So getting that to fit in everybody's schedules and getting them to give us a few weeks that we need for that is a balancing act right now. So that's kind of where we are with the timing. The only thing that we don't know that may affect our timeline is the ability to get and source the slate. We want to match the same slate that we had. We know the quarries, one of our roofers who's worked with us before, Russell Roofing Co. I also know from my previous work at Partners for Sacred Places They used to advertise in our magazine, actually. Russell has always done who's done the roofing here for a long time. We know where to get the slate and where the quarries are. Slate sourcing, it can go up and down. It can be, I have it all here, or you're going to wait 10 weeks for us to cut it and get you the sizes that you need. So we're still not sure. As of now, the quarries have it and can probably get it to us within a month. We don't know if that will change as we start getting closer to the winter, but hopefully, we'll still be in a good situation and just be able to get the slate that we need. Again, we don't need a huge quantity. But we don't need a huge quantity. So, we have to kind of work with them on that.
Just a quick question. Are there other areas of the roof that need addressing that we've thought about doing at the same time, or is the rest of the roof in pretty good shape?
So the rest of most of the church roof here is in good shape. We are looking at, it's funny, last winter I started looking at the narthex. There continues to be water infiltration in the narthex. The roof, I've been on the roof of the narthex like 3 times, is sealed and flashed to high heaven. You could take a bath up there. But for some reason, there's still water entering. We think at this point, the signs are pointing to actually the capstones on the parapet walls. They're not all flashed. So if, flashing is kind of where we catch those seams on roofing, right? And it's usually metal. We have copper and metal flashing everywhere. But sometimes water actually comes right through the stones, through the capstones. So we have some areas that have been through flashed where you actually put metal flashing between the 2 stones. We've done that in some areas, but not all areas. And the other thing is there's been some repointing to the narthex. The narthex was built in the teens, early 20s. There was later repointing that was not really correct. And to make a long story short, maybe allowing, the water looks for a place to go, right? And if the whole roof has actually been sealed very well, it's actually just going to come through the stone itself. And if the mortar isn't correct, then that mortar is helping the water come through the stone. So we may be looking more at the flashing, the flashings up there under the capstones and the masonry. We're not sure if we can, if that makes sense to tackle with the same work the roofers are doing because they're really slate and regular roofing guys. But Heritage Conservation may help us start looking at the mortar issue and the capstones. So we may start kind of working on that with them here. Yeah.
What is the estimate that the insurance company is going to have to pay for?
Well, they've already been paying us. The whole project from cleaning to repair is going to probably end up being basically just shy of $1 million. Oh, well, that's good. I'm glad it's less than we thought. The mitigation alone is close to $800,000. Actually, $800,000 now with the final bills. There's a complicated process where the insurance company doesn't let us just pay ServPro directly. They actually review and approve those bills before we're allowed to pay them, although they give us the money up front. So to do it. So in any case, we're paying the last bills now, and it's going to be close to $800,000 for that, and then about $200,000 for everything else, kind of in that ballpark.
And then will our rates go up?
I'm sure they will, but I will say I don't know how far because we are, in some ways, a good customer. And what I mean by that is, I actually dealt with this a lot when I was at Partners for Sacred Places. A lot of churches often don't have a very good scenario with their insurance companies because they have so much deferred maintenance that they inevitably get into a fight with the insurance company saying, well, you didn't take care of your building in the first place, and one, and two, are we just paying for deferred maintenance, or is this really related to your event? That's not our case here. And we have a lot of coverage. We have very good coverage. We have a $1,000 deductible. So whoever negotiated the original policy, pray for them in your prayers, because we're very grateful for that. So I'm sure the rate, although actually the policy renewed actually in July and it didn't go up very much.
What is the company?
It's actually Church Insurance, which is an entity originally created that's Episcopal affiliated. So a lot of Episcopal parishes and organizations are insured by them.
Crazy question, but for everyone's comfort, when are the cushions going to be?
Oh yeah, thank you for asking, because I was just getting to the cushions. I thought about that this morning when we all first sat down and I heard that wonderful churchy creak all throughout the place. So the cushions, thankfully, the company we wanted to use, we want to accomplish two things. We want to take advantage of two things here. The acoustics are really good now without cushions. And so there's been a lot of talk about, getting better acoustics in here. So there are basically acoustic pew cushions where they use I know, it sounds, well, they'll invent anything these days, really, won't they? But this is a material that's, basically it's harder and more reflective, so it provides more resonance and bounce from the cushions. So the company that I, targeted actually was the company that made our cushions about, I think 15, 20 years ago. So it's the same company. They had all of our measurements. They had all of our, information. The representative came out personally, because they're based out in the Midwest, came out and took a look. So we're getting new cushions, and we had a small group of folks who've been involved in the design before who helped choose the fabric, which is similar to, but a little bit different. But to answer your question, this is another supply chain thing. So we ordered them basically beginning of September, and they have been very clear they cannot promise anything more than 120 days. So maybe less, but they can't promise more than that. I mean, anything shorter than that. Maybe. It might happen, but they're unwilling to promise that. So yeah, so about January-ish, yeah. So that won't be a Christmas present, but maybe Epiphany. I don't know. Maybe the Three Kings will come. Yeah.
Once they start again on the process that you just described, will we again have to go into the parish house for our services?
No, we shouldn't have to. They won't work on the weekends, and they'll be able to cover this when it's not exposed. So no, we should be able to worship here. And in fact, that's why these three pews are why you're not allowed to sit here. I asked that these not be bolted in, and we don't sit here for safety, so that actually once they start working, we can just move these three pews back out, put them probably in the undercroft, and then just have this as a staging and work area for what needs to happen. So that's what we're going to do. So no, we won't have to leave the church again for when we start working on the roof.
Is there a sprinkler system, or is there going to be? So a lot of churches, all churches have sprinklers up there. That would be $1 million for sure to put one in. No, we do have. We have a really good fire alarm system. That's part of why we didn't have a tragedy. Is we had, and we just had them repaired, and the whole thing repaired. We have sensors basically all along this whole way. We have multiple fire sensors here. We updated right before the fire to a global, it's basically a cell system. Before we were using landlines through Verizon, now we use a cell system that makes the call from the firebox, and we pay immediately for all of those services. So we're in fairly good shape. It doesn't mean we have a fire suppression system, but we have a very good fire detection system, which, it comes down to the timing too. If the firefighters can get here in, 5 minutes, then that makes as much difference as whether or not sprinklers go on. The other thing about a sprinkler or suppression system is that causes its own damage. If that goes off, then you're dealing with water damage everywhere and, a lot more problems. Yeah.
What caused the fire in the first place?
It was an electrical system that's installed on the roof. It's called heat tape or heat trace that helps melt snow and ice in the winter. And it was on when it shouldn't have been on, and it's actually multiple factors. It's a perfect storm. So it was on when it shouldn't be on. It was hot summer, and then the humidity dropped. The heat trace had been by, we're not really sure who, and we don't want to start going to all our vendors and pointing fingers, but basically been pulled and coiled up inside one of the copper gutters. Now, we know why copper's so, I love cooking, but why copper's so great for cooking, right? It's an amazing conductor of heat. So it had been pulled out, wrapped up, and shoved into a copper gutter. It was on, it was hot, the humidity dropped, and there were leaves in there. So it was basically like perfect storm of factors that happened. Unfortunate, but gladly caught it soon enough. So I hope it wasn't too much detail, but any questions? Any other questions?
Thanks, Josh.
Great,
Thank you. Yeah.